amid all of the crazy things that are happening in our country. I hope that you've been able to get some time with family, people you love, and people you care about as summer gets underway. We just marked the last day of school and have been really just thinking about what matters most in life. Spent some time today with Jasmine and the kids. Right now, they're in the process of procuring a sandbox, which I'm sure will add a lot to our summer. And even though it seems like you can't hold things like that in your consciousness at the same time as what's happening in our country, I think spending time with our kids also reminds us why we do all of this. The right button. I had him, and I lost him. There we go. All right. Representative Jason Crow, thanks for taking some time to get together. And let me just offer a very, very brief introduction. In addition to being one of the most effective members of the United States Congress, Jason Crow is somebody who served with great distinction in the second best branch of the United States Armed Forces, the U.S. Army, soon to celebrate a major birthday. Joking apart, he's somebody who is a decorated combat veteran, somebody that a lot of Americans look up to. I know that I respect and admire his service, and thought this was a really important time for us to have a conversation about what's happening in the country, what is planned to be happening in a few days. Let me just start by asking you, I know it was a big day on Capitol Hill. You had the opportunity to exercise your oversight responsibilities with the U.S. Secretary of Defense. How's your day going?
Well, it was a tough hearing. First of all, Pete, thanks for having me. Just honored to join you. You're doing such incredible work, certainly during the administration and right now, helping lead the way in a lot of ways. So it's a real honor to be here. And listen, we're both vets. We learned about military leadership. Actually, our leadership, I think, started in the military when we really learned the foundations of it. And it's servant leadership, right? It's this idea that you are servants of the people that we are entrusted to lead. And what we continue to see coming out of this administration and what I saw in that Armed Services hearing with Pete Hegseth today is the opposite of all those things, right? When I was a paratrooper, you jump out of the plane first, and only then do your soldiers follow. When you're out in the field, as you remember, those late nights and it's cold in the middle of the night and hot chow gets delivered, your soldiers eat first, and only then, if there's food left over, do you get to eat. And it's the opposite with this administration. They push everybody out the door first, they eat first, and whatever is left is what we get. So it's really pretty stunning stuff.
We had words in my unit for the kind of people who would jump in line to get fed ahead of the people who they were supposed to be leading. I think they're unrepeatable words in in this.
Yeah, we're not going to say it. We're not going to say it here, but we know what they are.
Yeah. Look, one of the things I want to ask you is with this planned military parade on the occasion of the president's birthday, it got me thinking about all of the things that really did inspire me about drill and ceremony, about saluting the flag and hearing the anthem, and various occasions, including parades that I think so many of us grew up going to or participated in when we were in uniform. And I thought it was a good chance to just do a gut check on what actually does rate a parade. What should we be honoring right now? I don't think it's the personality of the politician in charge of the federal government, but there's a lot that we would do well to honor that you and I certainly saw around us when we were in uniform. What do you think does deserve a parade right now?
Yeah, you're totally right, Pete. I mean, listen, the parade, ceremony, remembrance, these are really important things for the country. They're really important things for veterans. We have the 250th anniversary of our home branch coming up. Our home branch, the Army, precedes the birth of the country, right? That's an important thing, right? That's important to recognize and to hold up. But there's a right way to do that and a wrong way to do that, right? And spending $50 million of taxpayer money and having tanks roll through Washington, D.C. for the first time ever and taking 6,000 troops away from their families and away from their training on Trump's birthday is just not the way to do it, right? Which is why I'm recommending people plant flags at veteran ceremonies. They volunteer at veterans nursing homes, serving meals. The spirit of servant leadership is the best way to honor the service of our men and women, actually giving back, contributing, and stepping up. And, I'll also say this, I was never a good parade soldier. Like I was not one of those soldiers who was chomping at the bit to be like, oh, I can't wait for parade duty, right? It's not something that, soldiers usually love to do, because you're sitting there for 2 or 3 hours in the hot sun and you're getting, eaten alive by mosquitoes and you can't slap them away from your face. I mean, it's really pretty tough duty, but it's important duty. But it's important that when we do it, we do it for the right reasons, because it's not without some cost and expense, both to the soldiers and their families and to our country.
When I think about what we honor in those contexts, and certainly what I think propelled a lot of us to decide to serve, it was, at least to me, very much the idea of not living in the kind of country where the leader of the government sends tanks down the streets of the Capitol in celebration of himself. I've seen countries like that. I think a lot of Americans have served in or near countries like that. And it's precisely to live in a free and democratic society marked by liberty that I think a lot of us feel like we owe a lot to our country, including potentially deciding to serve. And that takes us right to one of the things that I think has so many of us, certainly your and my generation of Iraq and Afghanistan vets, but really people through the generations, has us concerned, is this idea of the non-political military, the depoliticized military that is completely separate and apart from party politics, is so important. I mean, I know when I was in uniform, we would, sitting around, over a cup of coffee, we'd have all kinds of arguments about politics. We were who we were. We came from different communities and backgrounds at home. But when it came to the moment we were going out the door or outside the wire or getting into a vehicle or just doing our job, we knew that we laid whatever our political beliefs were at the side and just teamed up to get something done. We're in such a different place now. The replacement of leading military officers, flag officers, over what appears to be political allegiance, a very partisan speech that the president gave using, in my view, our service members as props, puts all of that on the line. How do you reflect on that as somebody who served with great distinction and now serves as an elected official with, a party identification? What does it take for us to protect the military from that politicization, and how can all of us, whether we're in elected office like you are or not, how can we take a stand on that?
It was such a deeply painful moment for me to see these images of Donald Trump at Fort Bragg with paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division behind him. I mean, that's how I started my career. I was a paratrooper at the 82nd. That is my home unit, and to put those paratroopers in the position of taking sides, of booing elected officials, of having to, demonstrate allegiance to a person as opposed to the country and Constitution, was a very painful sight. And what's more is it's dangerous. It's just so deeply dangerous, as you eloquently pointed out just now, right? When I think about America, when I think about what actually does make us great, I think about those paratroopers that I actually served with in Iraq, right? And they came from every corner of the country: east, west, north, south, urban, rural, straight, gay, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, even some that weren't citizens, right? And they all stood up, and we came together and we focused on what we had in common. We drew strength from our differences. We brought important differences that made us stronger as a team. And we focused also on what we had in common to come together and to do great things, right? And that is when we are at our best. That's when our military is at its best. And what this administration is doing, what Donald Trump and Pete Hegseth are doing, is turning their back on all of that, right? That unless you are, in his words, right? I'm not making this up. Unless you are a Christian right-wing male, there's no place for you in this military. Like, how dangerous and corrosive is that to everything that the military and service stands for? I mean, what are you hearing from your veterans, right? We have a lot of veteran friends, huge veterans networks. The vets that I know are appalled by this. What do you see in it?
Yeah, there is a lot of whiskey tango foxtrot going around on the different group chats that I'm in with people I served with, and it's exactly as you say. I mean, one of the best and most powerful things about serving is learning to trust your life to somebody who has a totally different outlook than you do. And they have a different background politically or economically or racially or whatever it might be. And yet that brought us together in a way that I think is exactly what we need more of as a country. And, the military is not for everybody, but the more we can have experiences like service that give us those terms for forming trust with each other outside of politics, the stronger our society is going to be. I know you've been outspoken, as I have, on the need for more national service. I always thought of that as a very bipartisan priority. I think you found a lot of people across the aisle to work with on that. And yet, one of the first things it seems like they did out of the gate was cut AmeriCorps. How's it going in terms of the defense of the idea of national service, not just a non-political military, but civilian service too?
Well, the bipartisan Veterans Caucus still makes that a priority. A group of Democrats and Republicans who have come together and said that service has actually changed our life, right? That many of us wouldn't be here, including me, had it not been for that service experience. And I still view leadership through that lens of my time as a private. I started as an enlisted member. I was a private, and then I became an officer later and ended as a captain. And I still think about that time serving, getting dirty, getting sweaty, suffering in Ranger School, being tired, being hungry. And there's something transformative to people when you work together and you suffer together and you achieve great things together. It breaks down barriers, right? You can take people from vastly different backgrounds that otherwise wouldn't find themselves together, and you put them in that situation and they have to overcome something big, and they have to suffer together, sometimes literally in the trenches, right? And then you take those people out of it later on, and you know what? Those people might disagree. They might have different political affiliations, but those people are never going to look at each other and say, you're evil, you're unpatriotic, you are a threat to my existence. They're just not going to do it. You're not going to take your battle buddy and your foxhole buddy and say that, right? And that same idea transforms or transcends into other service. The AmeriCorps, Teach for America, the Civilian Conservation Corps over ages. When Americans work together, we break down barriers and we prevent polarization. So we're trying to expand that. And, part of this is also this notion of what makes us strong. And I'd be curious your views because, there are these videos coming out of DOD of Pete Hegseth lifting weights. There's all this focus on lethality and war fighting. What, in your experience and what we went through together, what really does make us strong?
Yeah, I think it's our commitment, our fidelity to the Constitution, our fidelity to the idea of being a freedom-loving people. Look, performative PT is definitely part of military culture. I appreciate that and I respect that, but there is shockingly little coming out of the leadership of this Pentagon about the fundamentals of American strength, which, as you know, there's a lot more to that than toughness. It is about discipline. It is about that fidelity that is, I think, woven through the oath that all of us took, about it not being about you, but being about the Constitution. And that's what I think is at stake in this moment. I know that you're going to have to take some votes soon, and time is short. I do want to just ask quickly for any response you might have to something that I just saw moments before I sat down and pulled out the phone to do this Instagram Live, but I see a lot of people in the chat asking about, which is this incident with Senator Padilla. And again, I just saw literally a minute or two of footage on it, but at least from what I can tell, he was present at a press event or some kind of media event with the Secretary of Homeland Security, and there is imagery that I think speaks for itself of him being pushed around. I'm hearing he may have been put in handcuffs, and to me, it's hard not to think of what's playing out literally today in a moment like that, which, again, or at least based on the couple minutes I've seen, appears to involve an American elected official being physically pushed around, possibly arrested. I don't know all the details over politics. It sounds like the exact opposite of the kind of foundation of the republic and commitment to freedom that you and I've been talking about this whole time, that you put your life on the line repeatedly to defend. Have you seen that imagery, and how are you thinking about that? And what would you advise a lot of the people who I see in the comments right here, wondering what they can do or say if they are horrified by what they're seeing in this news of the day?
Yeah. I did see the video and I was pretty shocked by it, which is saying something because there's so much that happens every day with this administration. You have to fight that numbness and normalization of any of this. But by any standard, this is shocking stuff. Taking a United States senator and manhandling and wrestling them to the ground and out of a room. But this is a feature, not a bug of this administration. Right. Let's also remember that they just indicted one of my colleagues, a member of Congress, for performing oversight of an ICE facility. Let's remember that they just issued an executive order. Donald Trump just issued an executive order allowing him to federalize National Guard troops. And that executive order never once mentions California. It never once mentions LA. It allows the president to send to federalize troops anywhere, anytime, under any circumstances, with no time limit, right? And let's also remember that this is the president that weaponized a riotous crowd that brutally beat 140 police officers and tried to kill me and my colleagues a few years ago, right? This president truly has no boundaries, right? Let's also not forget that this is the president when there were protesters in Lafayette Square. Went to his senior military commanders and said, we need troops to shoot at these protesters. So what people need to do is stand up, let them know who we are as a country, that we will not be silenced. Because what Donald Trump, this is my opinion, what Donald Trump and his administration are trying to do is they're trying to extract power now. They're in the phase of trying to take power from the American people. Right? This is classic playbook. We have to deny them that power. Don't give them any more power than they have, right? And part of that is fear. Let's not be afraid, right? Let's not allow them to use fear to suppress dissent from freedom of speech and using fear to make us cower, because we won't do it. And I just don't do fear really well.
That's a great way to put it, and I think the exact right way to think about this. This is a means to an end. These provocations, whether it's tanks rolling down the streets of the Capitol on the birthday of the head of the government, or the roughing up or detention or other abusive treatment of elected officials or journalists or anybody else who is doing their job or exercising their rights. It has a purpose. It's not an end in itself. It is designed to make it harder to stand up or to speak out. And yet, this is a country that I still believe is a freedom-loving people that will not tolerate that will stand up, and that we can come through this moment, and then we'll have a lot of work to do to shore up the liberties and the democracy that make America America. Just one last thought I want to ask about, because you know a thing or two about courage. And you're in the U.S. House, which theoretically has a lot of power, especially among House Republicans who have the majority. You have worked very effectively with Republicans on a number of different issues. And at the same time, it seems very difficult to get them, one of the bodies of people who could do the most right now, to speak up. What do you think it would take to change their incentives, change their attitudes, I don't know, change something, so that they could be in better touch with their conscience? The ones who you and I both know personally well enough to know that they know better than to be on board with this. What has to happen for them to stand up? And how much of that is up to the rest of us to create that environment?
It's such a good question. And I would have given you a different answer a couple of years ago than the one I'm about to give you, because my thinking on this has changed. We both grew up and learned a lot about leadership in the military, and you learn about selfless service. You learn that service, by definition, means you're sacrificing something. You're giving something up, right? You're giving more than you're getting, right? It can't be a net positive in order for you to actually be serving. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not a positive experience. That's not what I'm saying. It's a very positive experience. But the point is you need to be drawing more or putting more in than you're drawing, right? So I came to Congress thinking that my colleagues inherently had that mentality. The vast majority of them had that mentality, and that they would be willing to sacrifice the job if there were important principles issues that they faced. What I have seen, and I think this is more the story of the Trump era than just Donald Trump, is the capitulation of everybody else around him. Our members of Congress that have independent constitutional obligations, that have raised their right hand and taken the same oath that we took as veterans to join the military. And they have decided to do everything possible simply to keep the job than to stand on principle and to risk losing it. And that tells me that it's not service for them. It tells me that they're getting more from it than they're giving into it, that balance is off. So what I simply think needs to be done is if they're just more concerned about keeping their job than anything else, then that risk epicenter needs to be shifted away from Donald Trump and back to their constituents. Those members need to be more afraid of their constituents and not listening to the voices of the people they represent than Donald Trump. And we're already seeing that happening. We're already seeing them avoiding town halls. We're already seeing people stand up and say, don't take away my health care. Don't take away my education. Right? Don't leave me and my family without a home. Right? So that's what we need to do. We need to shift that away so that those members, if they're not going to do the right thing, and we're not asking them to storm the beaches of Normandy, right? We're asking them simply to take tough votes and maybe lose their job in the process. But, that's what America's about, is sacrifice, is to do the right thing. Then simply we need to shift that risk assessment and make them afraid of their constituents again.
Well put. And I hope your followers and mine who are following this conversation take that to be an empowering message, because if you want to make sure our members of Congress are more afraid of the consequences of doing the wrong thing than they are afraid of doing the consequences of doing the right thing, it's pretty much up to the people who are showing up at these town halls and creating that kind of pressure from the bottom up. You and I can only do so much. What really matters is for them to hear from the people that they're most accountable to.
Yeah.
I know you've got votes. Appreciate taking a little time to have this conversation. Yeah. And thanks for everything that you're doing for the values that we share and care about.
Likewise, appreciate the conversation. And just for the record, I am pro beard. I'm in the beard camp. It looks fantastic. So let's
Likewise. All right, I'll notch up one more vote on Team Beard.
You can do a little beard caucus or something.
Sounds good. Take care. Thanks a lot.
Yep, bye.
Good to be with you.